Hi, y'all. I'm here with Dan and Matthew, and this is a stream of consciousness transition of Certify. We're going to be talking about what type of work is in progress and then why it's in progress and what we're going to be working on next. So I'll start at a super high level with saying in plan overall, the overarching project that we're working on is work items, right? So it's creating a unified implementation of planning work, right? So everything that's separate today, issues, epics, requirements, all coming together into a single thing. So that's the overarching theme. And requirements is one of the items that we want to migrate to work items, and that work has been happening behind the scenes for a while. So the first step of that is moving basically in the back end the data from the requirements table into the issues table, which is behind the scenes what's powering work items. So that work has been happening for a while, and now we're at a stage where the data is replicated, so it's in both places, in the requirements table and the issues table. But there's bits of functionality that are missing before we can make a full cutoff and basically deprecate the old requirements experience from the actual functionality perspective. So I linked, one thing that I noticed as I was putting this together is that there's not really an epic where all of this transition work is together, right? So Matthew, that's something that I would really like your help with. I linked some things that I know, but if you ping the team on Slack, like probably Felipe and Charlie will know all the different work that's in progress from the backend perspective, and they can help you. And it'd be good to just have this all under one epic so we can get a complete picture of what does migrating requirements to work items mean, right, as far as work.
Awesome. Yeah, I did create an epic like 10 minutes ago.
Oh, awesome.
So there's like nothing in it, but I will ping the team.
Yeah, they will know what is needed, but there's basically two flavors of work. The first flavor is like backend, behind the scenes, moving data from one place to another. That's been in progress for some time. And then, and really there's like not a lot of UX or product work needed there, right? Because it's just getting data in the right tables and everything. And then there's a second flavor of work, which is building out work items to meet the needs of requirements. There's specific things that requirements have that issues don't have, or that tasks don't have, right, that need to be present. The first one being the concept of a status. So work items have open closed, but that's the level of granularity that's there. Requirements have different statuses under the verification status field, which indicates basically if it was satisfied, not satisfied, or unverified. So there's 3 different values in addition to open archived. So we need to build that out within work items, right? Some of this like additional level of granularity of state. So that's where status comes in. And we can do a deep dive into that in a minute. The other part that is missing is the CSV import export that doesn't exist in work items. It exists in issues, but there's even functional differences between requirements import export and issues import export. I actually think requirements import export is slightly better because it allows you to select what fields are exported, which is nice. But basically that needs to be built out in work items. The team is spiking, basically doing a technical spike to see what all the work is entailed in doing that. And for now, I basically was very high level in guidance and say like build something that's exactly like what requirements has. But there's an opportunity if we want to improve that experience in some way, we could, right? But just to keep it simple, my directions were very high level and said like just exactly the same, but for work items. And then lastly, in this one, I'm actually unsure of what work has been done, but requirements have the ability to be linked to a test case. So work items should have the ability to be linked to a test case. And for all of these will be what we call widgets for work items, where we can say we want this behavior available only for requirements, but not for epics, as an example, or tasks, right? Status and CSV import export, I think, are more general, where any work item should have that. Linking a work item to a test case, I think, will be a requirement specific functionality, right? We wouldn't expect any other type of work item to have this behavior. But maybe that's something to validate. I see you thinking, Dan. But that work, I don't think has even started, but that's something to figure out with the team, because I'm actually not sure. And these are the items that I know, but this is something else, Matthew and Dan, that could use a good scrub of just walking through the requirements experience and seeing what else needs to be built out. And also maybe the team has been thinking about this. All right. So that's the high level of why, right? And what like the big boulder is for Certify. And status is in progress. CSV import export is just getting started from like a technical spec perspective. So about status. In the initial implementation, so we did one issue. There's an epic that I linked here, and we implemented one part of it. But we called it verification status because we were thinking very requirement specific. But Gabe and I talked about this, and we basically want to build a more granular concept of a status for work items in general. So we decided to abstract from verification status to just more generally status, right? Because that's something that every work item can have, but then we can have more of the, well, status for requirements means verified, unverified. I mean, satisfied, unsatisfied, unverified. Status for epics is more in progress, complete, etc. Right? So each work item can have their own status, but at the end of the day, they all have a status, right? So we wanted to abstract it more. And that's what we decided on. And there's going to be some work this milestone to like rename it to status and then build out more of the components for it. So it's like a GraphQL API to do like CRUD on a status field. So create, read, update, delete. Now there's like a couple of things here that are interesting. Dan, you asked around like validation. So one, the term status, I'm fairly confident that that's like the right terminology and that it would be understood for requirements customers that like status means this, but that would be something that's good to validate and then figure out if we need to do any more in on-screen education or something about what this value is. So that's one. Two is I included some screenshots for what the UI was gonna look. Well, it's in the Epic somewhere and I can find it and direct link it. But we had another designer help put those together. And the assumption in those screenshots is that we would change the experience to basically have the requirements list as it exists today. But then when you click it, you see a work item modal instead of the requirements modal. But we have not validated that that's like a good experience, right? So we should definitely do some testing on that. I don't think it's that controversial, but that would be a good thing to validate. So those are the basic things I would say. Then we have the more complex things, like archiving enclosed. In requirements, we call it when you set something away as archiving, and in issues, we call it close. It would be good to consolidate that into a single term, right? That means like I'm done with this item. But I don't know what the right term is, or if there's a real need for that difference in terminology. Because they were different implementations, each team named it whatever they wanted, but it would be nice to have a single term and have that be more unified. And then more broadly, right, like bigger question is how close do we want to bring the experiences together, right? Like, do we want to go as far as saying we have issues and requirements and tasks all within a big list, and then you can just filter and get requirements? Or do we want to keep it more separate like it is today, where you go one place to view requirements and have requirements workflows, and another place where you view your issues and tasks? That's been a big question, and I think something we want to figure out eventually. It's not immediate, but it's something we want to figure out eventually. Dan, you had some questions?
We can rewind to what I was thinking about.
Okay.
And it's the definition of requirement, because in some stuff I've been reading, requirements can be business level or the real detail level. So some people might document the requirements as epics or as OKRs or as issues. So the thing that had my cogs were in is about linking to test cases is if the requirements are documented, like a business requirement is documented at an epic level, would there be a need to link to a test case then? But all of that comes down to the definition of requirement, both from a customer point of view, but from a feature point of view as well.
Mm-hmm. What we have now are basically assumed to be system level requirements that are verifiable via test. So they're behavioral requirements, like low level. If you go through some of the research and maturity kind of like epics that we have, there is a need for in the future having requirements be nested so that you can have like the more high level and then decompose them into system requirements. But as of today, it's assumed that they're system level, basically the lowest level of requirements.
Matt, I think you had the next question going through the doc at somewhere around 2C.
Yeah, this is more for you, Melissa. In creation of epics and issues that might have features landing on a paid version, do we want to always keep this confidential from the start, or should
No,
we?
you don't need to keep it confidential. You just need to put the label that is, there's labels for each tier, so you just put like ultimate on it. But no, I'll send you a link for when we do confidentiality, but it's basically only if it's related, if you name a specific customer, or if it's related to security. But that's about it.
Okay, that's easy enough. Thank you. And then I was just had another question around fixed end date. Was there any like previous discussions around when we're looking for completion around? Okay.
No, there's no completion date, no hard deadline on any of this. And I don't have an epic for transitioning feature epic. That was something I am asking Amanda to work on this. There's probably an old one somewhere, but it's definitely not up to date.
Nice. I think the next one in the list is around, yeah, you found it coming up around statuses. What else is expected to have a status?
So far all work items that I can think of have it. So like issues, epics, requirements, incidents definitely. It's basically how, and the reason is because this represents the life cycle of an item. Right now we are very coarse grained, right, where something is either open or closed, but there's a lot of shades of gray in between, which customers want to be able to represent. Like if you think even as GitLab, the workflow labels that we use for our issues would be what the status is when that's a first level attribute. We're not, as GitLab, very diligent about using epics, right? But epics also have a work life cycle of their own. It's a little bit more high level, right? It would be something like open, in progress, or like something is being validated, right? There's different workflows. They're not quite as detailed as the workflow labels that we have now for issues, but they will have their own life cycle. And then requirements have verification status. And incidents, I'm not aware if they've built something that's status like. I believe they have. Let's see. I was looking at this recently and I thought I saw something that I was like, oh, that's like status. Yes, they have status. They've built on their own. Triggered, resolved, and something else. Acknowledged. Triggered, acknowledged, resolved. So the incident management team has built their own status flow, which again is like why we want it to be unified, right? To have it be called the same thing. Maybe it holds different values depending on the work item type, but it's a similar experience.
And is there, I think I saw we might or we will have a combination of status and state as well. Is that, if I understood that correctly, like sometimes there's two things that work together or against each
Yeah,
other?
that's the part that we're trying to figure out that we need to validate more broadly, and Gabe is owning that. There's a different ways that you can like achieve that end result, but the general concept is you can think of it like you have this broad like let's take our product development flow, right, as an example. We have labels that are associated with each step of the way, but within that flow, those are the statuses, right? Within that flow, there's almost like buckets, right, where they signify something being waiting, right? So it's not started, right? There's a particular set of statuses that are not started, right? They're just sitting in the backlog waiting for someone to work. If you think of a report like value stream that you're very familiar with, you wouldn't count those as in progress, right? These set of statuses, they're backlog. Then they get to a set of statuses that are in progress, right? If we want to be very broad, or if you want to be more fine-grained, you can say like this is validation, right? Like once you're in these 3-4 labels, you're technically in the validation phase. Then once you get to this other set of labels, you're in development, right? When an engineer picks it up, when they're in dev, being tested, etc. These are in progress or in development. And then in the end, it's like you've completed. There's a specific set of labels that represent that. And then there's a completely separate set of labels that signify like, I never worked on this and I just closed it because either it's not a good fit or it was a duplicate or etc. Right? But that meta information about these groups of statuses is not present anywhere in GitLab, and we have to have a way to capture that. But we don't know exactly what that looks like. It could be just there's specific, almost like metadata associated with each status where you assign it to a bucket. That's what other tools do, where you create a status and you say, this is what part of this category. So in progress, not started, etc. And they have predefined categories of basically statuses where they go. Or you can create your own way of creating those categories and that's where you have 2 attributes, but we don't know exactly what that's going to be. Gabe and the project management team are owning that part of basically how do we represent these categories of statuses. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Where the boundaries are between statuses and some of these other things doesn't quite make sense yet, but I don't think we need to work that out on this
You
call.
can look at that issue. There's a really good screenshot of how other tools do it that I won't name because I want to put this. That makes it very clear. They've done a good job. So it makes it very clear what this is.
Nice. The next one is around what do we know about who's using requirements, how they're using it, and why they're using it.
So we have MAU metrics, and using our analytics, we can definitely see some of the customers that are using it. A lot of it is public sector, because it aligns very closely with how they work, right? Where they have regulatory needs and requirements. Some of it is kind of like the flavor of like regulated industries, right? So like automotive, banking tend to be the ones that use it. And very much how we would expect. I haven't run across any like surprising use cases of requirements. I think the naming is pretty clear and the functionality is pretty clear. That being said, I think this is an opportunity where we can do a lot of rediscovery of our customers and do some like high level interviews. That's something Matthew listed it as well, but that's something that I wanted him and I to work on, and you as well. Once y'all get onboarded, of basically doing some high level interviews of customers to learn behaviors and what they're using, what's working, what's not working, and refresh the backlog. Because we do need to figure out what's next after work items, so we get through the haul of moving the data from one place to another.
Do you want to say your bit out loud, Matt, for the tape?
Yeah, so as part of onboarding, I will be digging into this and I'll definitely pull you in, Dan. And that's something I want to dig into like as soon as I possibly can. So definitely a priority.
I have some leads on potential like public sector customers from someone I know, but this would be a good one that we can do some broadcasting. Matthew, you can, where you go into the field channel and just say like, hey, who's using requirements? Like, I want to chat. And I'm sure you'll get some takers.
Yeah, I've already had a few folks ask me what we were doing. And
Oh, awesome. Yeah, I'd be like, hey, help me.
Exactly. I can leverage that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're a little bit over time, but we're almost done. Are you guys okay to stick around for a few more minutes? Okay. So what's next? That's what so we have obviously like the big haul of migrating requirements to work items, right? There's a lot of work to do there. A lot of questions to answer, like how closely do we bring the experiences together between the project management, product planning work, and requirements work world, right? Should they completely be separate? Should they be closer together? I think that's a big question that we need to answer. We also need to think about how we introduce a new experience to users in general, right? As we're changing the UI and moving things around, like we should be mindful of having that be a good experience. There's different patterns that different companies have used, like some people do walkthroughs, some people have available like the side-by-side experience available for a time. We just need to think about what we want to do. I don't have strong opinions. And there's probably a lot more to think about. Like I said, there's probably a lot of things to think about, but I have not spent a lot of time thinking deeply about this. So that's why I'm glad you guys are here. So Matthew, you want to voice over?
Yeah, I know in the last product meeting, David had mentioned UI as a priority, so definitely something to think about as we work on this.
Yeah, just making sure the transition from the old experience to the new experience is a positive. And then after that, right, after we get through all that is when we can build new and exciting things for requirements, right? Like the experiences. Moving to work items in itself will give it a lot of new functionality, right? Like for example, they'll get discussions, labels, assignees, all things that customers have asked for. So that in itself will be a huge win. But there's an opportunity for more, right? Requirement specific enhancements. So that's where I think these customer conversations will be really helpful in revamping those. There's some previous research that y'all can look at, but that's fairly old. So I think doing our own will be helpful. And Dan, do you want to voice over?
Sure. So on building new things, will the focus still be on the aerospace use case, or do you expect? I understand that was because we had some subject matter expertise in the team, or do you think it's open to look at how the use cases based on the customers who are using it currently, and just a sense of where you think that'll go?
I think we should go where the customers are taking us, right? Like if we've got a lot of takers in a specific sector, we should help them expand their usage. I believe that we've gotten a lot of adoption from PubSec. So I think it would be interesting to see if there's things that are specific to that use case that we need to build out versus the more broad requirements use case. But that will be something that you and Matthew can help drive.
Yeah, I think if we want to look for more of an expanded use case beyond PubSec customers, then maybe figuring that out and then sharing it so then other customers can follow as an example. So I think right now, looking at the requirements page, it really does feel very focused on like regulated industries, but there must be some use cases among like SMB customers even that we just perhaps don't know about.
Yes, actually, like parting thought that I haven't written down anywhere, but now is on tape and with you all. But us at GitLab, we're doing all these certifications now, right? We are managing requirements and proving that we're meeting them somehow. I don't know how we're doing it. So we should talk to our own people and say like, hey, as we're doing all these different certifications, how are we managing that process? I've seen collections of issues that have tables and line items pointing to issues. That would be very interesting to explore and a really good dogfooding opportunity and something that's more broad, right? So anyone who has any kind of company that's on the internet probably has some semblance of these certifications that they're pursuing. So very excellent call out, Matthew. And that's something else that we should put some thought into, like you interviewing these internal customers. And having a goal of like the next certification that we pursue, the process is managed using requirements management. I feel like that would be really awesome.
That'd be fantastic.
All right. Is there anything else that I can help clarify from like the very high level of the team and what's in the horizon? All right.
This was really useful, so thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm so glad you are here to help me document and drive all these things forward. All right. I'm going to stop the recording now.